The Gifterin was a human engineer working on a small trading station that circled a pale green moon, far from the busy trade routes. He had come here chasing work and peace after long years of building machines for governments that always wanted weapons, not wonders. His small workshop smelled of oil metal and the faint spice of coolant. The station was filled with all kinds of beings who came to trade in silence under the rule of the Dominion Empire, a power that disliked human experiments, especially ones that touched Starborn relics. Aaron kept to himself until the day he met her. She was a small alien girl from the Starborn kin, with eyes that shimmered but saw nothing. Her name was Luma. Her people came from a world where light was sacred, yet she had been born blind. The medics of her race had tried everything, but their tech could not fix what nature had left. Dark Luma never complained, but when she walked the station corridors, she held a tiny bell to hear the echo, and not. Falaroon watched her one day as she almost walked into an open lift shaft and his heart stopped. He grabbed her arm just in time and she smiled at the sound of his voice saying, "Thank you," in broken human words. That moment stayed with him. That night, Aaron could not sleep. He sat at his bench and began to draw lines on a thin metal plate. He thought of how sound moved and how skin could feel. He built a small band shaped like a crown that fit around the head with sensors that caught vibration, heat and motion and translated them into soft pulses on the skin. The idea was simple: to let her feel space instead of seeing it. He spent 3 nights shaping it out of scrap circuits and adaptive gel. When he finished, he tested it on his own arm and felt air currents like a whisper. It worked. When he gave it to Luma, she was afraid to touch it, but he said gently, "It will not hurt. Just feel." She nodded and he helped her wear it. The moment it powered on, the tiny lights under the band flickered, and the air seemed to hum softly. Luma froze. Her lips parted as she turned her head slowly, as if listening to the world for the first time. She stepped forward, then another step and another. She laughed, bright and unbroken, the laugh of someone who has found freedom. She ran down the corridor, her small feet tapping the deck, and shouted, "I can feel the walls, I can feel you." The people watching stopped what they were doing. Some smiled, some recorded it, others whispered. By the end of the day, the whole station had heard about the human who gave sight to a Starborn child. Some called him a genius, some said he had crossed a line. The Dominion Empire had strict laws about reverse engineering, relic tech, and the Starborn kin guarded their history closely. But Aaron had used nothing from relics, only human logic and care. He told anyone who asked that he built it with his hands and a wish to help, not to control. Yet in quiet corners, alien merchants and officers whispered that humans always changed what they touched, and soon enough it would end badly. That night, while Aaron cleaned his tools, a small message blinked on his station console. It was from an encrypted channel marked Observation Notice. The text read, "Human Engineer Aaron designated, Person of Interest Project. Classification Relic Interface, active retrieval pending authorization." Aaron stared at the words, feeling the cold weight of trouble pressing at the edge of his calm. He looked toward the workshop door where Luma's small shadow danced in the hallway light. She was playing with a ball that rolled away and she chased it laughing. He smiled despite the warning. He told himself that he had done nothing wrong, that kindness could not be a crime. But the message stayed on his mind as the station lights dimmed and silence filled the corridors. He powered off the console and looked out the window at the green moon, turning slow and distant. He wondered how many eyes beyond the stars had already noticed the small spark of hope that had just appeared here because a human had decided to help. He did not yet know that far away 4 soldiers were already preparing their ship, their orders clear: retrieve the human and his creation at any cost. The arrival the next morning. The trading station woke to a new silence. The usual hum of dock traffic and chatter of merchants felt thinner, as if the air itself waited for something. Aaron felt it too. He had stayed awake most of the night watching the Visor's readings, trying to make sure it did not cause Luma harm. She slept peacefully in the corner of his workshop, clutching a small plush toy shaped like a star. When she woke, she smiled and asked if she could go outside again. He hesitated but nodded. She had earned a little joy after so much darkness. They stepped out together and walked through the wide central ring of the station, where lights shimmered through metal vents, and people of a dozen species traded goods and stories. The sight of Luma walking freely without her guiding bell made some stop and clap quietly. Others looked away uneasily. Aaron ignored the stares. He believed that good deeds spoke for themselves, but just before noon the calm broke. 4 ships appeared from warp just outside the station perimeter. They were small, fast, in silver gray, marked with the symbol of the Dominion Empire, a circle of 13 lines around a black sun. The docking bay lights turned red as customs officers rushed to meet them. The ships landed in perfect sequence, and from the airlock stepped 4 armored figures in pale suits that seemed to drink light. They moved with the precision of soldiers trained from birth, and the air around them felt cold, not from temperature, but from intent. The leader was taller than the rest, his armor edged in blue command lines. His name was Captain Revek, and his voice when he spoke to the dock chief was sharp enough to cut through the crowd. "We are here for an inspection and compliance verification," he said in a tone that made it sound like a verdict. Within an hour, the whole station knew that Dominion enforcement had arrived. They claimed it was a random inspection, but everyone felt the truth. These soldiers did not visit minor stations without a reason. Aaron's stomach tightened as he worked at his bench trying to look busy. Luma sensed his worry. She asked softly, "Are they here for me?" He shook his head, though his voice lacked certainty. "No, little one. No one is here for you." But deep inside, he knew that they were. The soldiers began moving through the corridors, scanning rooms, questioning technicians, checking manifests. Their leader carried a tablet showing a hollow image of the Visor. A witness from the docks had already given them footage of Luma running with it. Revek watched the recording in silence, then said, "This device matches relic signatures at 0.02%. That is enough to mark it for containment." His second-in-command, a narrow-eyed alien named Solon, asked what about the human. Revek replied he will be detained for questioning, at the least at most for transfer to Dominion Central Research. They spoke in the open without care for ears around them, because fear was their usual shield. That evening they reached the engineering section. Arun met them at the door, his hands open, showing he carried no weapon. Luma hid behind a crate, clutching the Visor off her head. Revek looked around the workshop with an expression that mixed disgust and curiosity. "You built this device?" he asked. Arun said yes to help a child see. Revek said, "It is not a toy. It is a relic interface, and you are not authorized to handle such things." Arun kept his voice steady. "It is not a relic. I built it from recycled sensors and pattern gel. You can scan it yourself." Revek gestured and Solon waved a scanner over the Visor. The display flashed with unknown symbols. Solon frowned. "It responds to Starborn code." Revek smiled, thin and cold. "Exactly what I thought." They demanded the Visor be surrendered for investigation. Aaron refused. He said it belongs to her. She can finally walk without fear. You can take my tools, but not her gift. Revek stepped forward, towering over him. "The Dominion does not care for sentiment. Human, your kind, plays with things you do not understand. That is how wars start." The soldiers began to move to take Luma. Aaron blocked their way. He knew he could not fight, but he would not move aside. The station chief arrived, then an older alien named Trell, who tried to calm things. He told Revek that station law requires a formal hearing before seizure. Revek agreed in words, but his eyes promised that the outcome was already chosen. He said, "Very well. A hearing tomorrow morning. Until then, the human and the device will remain under watch." That night, the soldiers posted guards outside Aaron's workshop. He sat inside, staring at the Visor on the table. Luma sat beside him, silent, her fingers tracing the edge of the device. She asked in a small voice, "Did I do something bad?" Aaron said, "Never. You did something brave. You showed them hope." That made her smile faintly before she fell asleep. He watched her breathing, steady and soft, and thought about how fragile that peace was. He wondered what the soldiers truly wanted, not just the Visor, but what it connected to. If it really linked to something ancient, then maybe they were not only after a tool, but a door to power. Near midnight, Aaron checked the Visor again. he noticed a faint signal pulse. Coming from its memory unit, repeating every few seconds, he connected a cable to trace it, and his console showed coordinates deep under the station, far below any mapped sector labeled Restricted Bone Vault. He felt his pulse quicken. Someone had built this signal long before his time, maybe even before the Dominion took control. The Visor had not created the link, it had awakened it outside. The guards shifted restlessly, unaware of what the human had just discovered. Aaron looked at Luma, then at the Visor. The choice before him was heavy. He could destroy the device and end the trouble, or follow the signal and learn what truth waited below. He took a slow breath and whispered to himself, "If they are coming for me, let them find more than they expect." The stars beyond the window burned quietly, but he could almost feel them watching, as if the universe itself waited to see what a single human would do next, when power and kindness walked hand in hand on the edge of danger, trial by fire. The next morning began with alarms that shook the station from sleep and filled the corridors with red light and distant echoes of metal clanging against metal. Aaron woke with a start and rushed to the door, but the guards outside were already running toward the dock, shouting about a hull breach. He grabbed the Visor and looked at Luma, who was still half asleep. She asked what is happening, and he said, "Stay close to me." The floor trembled beneath their feet as the intercom crackled with the voice of the station chief Trell calling everyone to emergency stations. Aaron's heart sank because he knew this was no accident. He ran to the window and saw flashes of blue light in the void outside. 4 warships had arrived, bigger than the Dominion patrol craft. These were hunters, the kind sent to break sieges, not to ask questions. Within minutes, Revik and his soldiers were moving through the corridors, barking orders at frightened workers. Revik's tone was calm but hard. All civilians to secure shelters now. He claimed the attack was from pirates, but Aaron saw the Dominion symbols on the ship's screens. There was no way pirates could come this far into protected space without help. He realized with a cold twist that the so-called pirates might be there as cover, a way to take the Visor in the chaos. He picked up a small pack filled with tools and led Luma out through the maintenance hatch at the back of his workshop. The narrow tunnels buzzed with life support systems, and the smell of metal dust hung in the air. They reached the lower levels where lights flickered and the noise of the battle was duller. Aaron crouched and opened a service panel connecting his console to the station grid. He pulled up the coordinates from the night before. The bone vault signal pulsed stronger now, and he saw something new. A low-frequency message written in Starborn code. He could not read it, but Luma placed her hand on the Visor and whispered, "It says home." She smiled faintly and pointed down toward the reactor section. Aaron hesitated. He knew the Dominion would be scanning all power sources, but if this vault was what he suspected, it might be safer than staying here. As they crawled deeper, the air grew warmer and the noise of machinery louder. He remembered stories of humans on old Earth who dug into caves during wars because darkness gave them a chance to think. That thought steadied him when they reached the lowest maintenance deck. He found a hatch sealed by a ring of ancient alloy, unlike any Dominion metal. Luma stepped forward and touched it. The Visor lit up in faint blue, and the hatch unlocked with a soft sigh of air. Inside was a narrow corridor lined with strange patterns that glowed faintly when Luma walked past, as if welcoming her. They entered, and the hatch sealed behind them. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, half mechanical, half organic. A lattice of silver threads rose from the floor to the ceiling, humming softly, and at its heart floated a core of light pulsing like a heartbeat. Luma gasped and said, "It is singing." Aaron felt the sound too, not with his ears but through his chest, like standing near a living engine. He approached carefully and pointed his scanner, but the readings made no sense. The core emitted energy older than any known system. It was a living memory archive, Starborn technology untouched for centuries. The Visor pulsed in rhythm with the core, and data began to flow through his console, streams of code symbols, maps, and fragments of language. Aaron realized that his creation had awakened something hidden deep beneath the station. Before he could process what was happening, the chamber lights flickered, and footsteps echoed from the corridor. The Dominion soldiers had traced them. Revik entered with Solon and 2 others, their weapons raised. Revik's voice carried the cold calm of authority. Step away from the relic, human. You do not understand what you are touching. Aaron raised his hands but did not move. He said, "This is not a weapon. It is a memory of her people. Look at it. It responds to her. Not me." Revek ignored him and stepped closer, aiming his rifle at Luma. She flinched, but the visor flashed bright white and a wave of light burst from the core. The soldiers were thrown back as if hit by a wall of wind. The lattice around the chamber began to shift, glowing brighter and forming shapes like wings made of energy. Revek shouted to his team to contain the relic, but their scanners went dead. Aaron grabbed Luma's hand and pulled her toward an exit that had opened on the far side. The lattice seemed to guide them. The soldiers fired stun bolts that fizzled before reaching their targets because the air itself shimmered with a protective field. Luma turned once and said softly, "It knows you, Aaron. It trusts you because you built with kindness." The words struck him deeper than any weapon, because they made sense in a way that logic could not explain. They ran through tunnels lit by the faint blue of the lattice while the soldiers chased from behind. The station shook as more explosions sounded above. The so-called pirates had breached the outer ring, and the Dominion troops were trapped between fighting off intruders and chasing two fugitives. Aaron used the chaos to his advantage. He diverted power from the maintenance grid and flooded corridors with coolant mist to confuse sensors. The mist sparkled in the light, giving the illusion of countless figures running. The soldiers fired at phantoms while Aaron and Luma slipped through unnoticed. When they finally reached a small service lift, Luma touched the panel and the visor pulsed again. The lift began to rise smoothly. Toward the habitation levels, Arun caught his breath and looked at her. The glow from the visor made her look almost ethereal. Not just a child, but something greater, a bridge between past and future. He said quietly, "They will not stop coming for us." She nodded and said, "Then we keep running until we make them see what you made is not a crown but a promise." He smiled, tired but proud because her courage gave him strength. As the lift doors opened, they stepped into a quiet storage hall above, the chaos below. The sound of battle faded to a dull roar. Aaron knew that the soldiers would regroup and come again. He also knew now that the visor and the core beneath the station were linked through her. The visor had chosen a guardian, and that guardian was human not by blood but by choice. He looked out the window at the stars and saw flashes of battle light reflected on the hull of distant ships. He whispered to himself, "This is our trial by fire, and if we survive it, the galaxy will never look at humans the same way again." The Starborn map. The air in the storage hall was still warm from the shaking of the station, but for the first time since dawn, Aaron felt a strange calm. The visor resting on Luma's head no longer pulsed with urgency but glowed with a steady rhythm that matched her breathing. The sound of battle had faded into a faraway hum, and through the thick window, the black of space shimmered with the cold beauty of stars. He crouched beside her and checked the small console he carried. The data from the core and the bone vault had copied itself into his system in fragments scattered like broken pieces of glass. He began sorting them and a pattern started to form. A map, lines of light stretching across, sectors of the galaxy ending at 5 points each marked with the same Starborn symbol he had seen carved into the lattice. Luma watched him work, her small hands folded in her lap. She asked, "What are those lights?" Aaron said softly, "I think they are places where more of your kind once slept, old nurseries maybe." The thought filled her with quiet wonder. She said, "Then they are waiting for me." He nodded. "Maybe they are waiting for both of us because I do not think they would have called to me if they wanted to be alone." The map brightened and one point near the edge of known space began to blink as if aware of their attention. "That one," Luma said, pointing. Aaron saved the coordinates and smiled a little. "We will go there, but not yet. Not until the station is safe." Above them, the fight between the Dominion and the pirates had turned chaotic. Reports from open comms said the pirates had retreated after heavy damage, but Revek and his men were still alive and sweeping decks. The station chief, Trell, contacted Aaron through a secure channel. His voice tense. "Aaron, what have you done? Those soldiers are hunting you." They say you awakened a Starborn relic that could compromise Dominion control. Aaron replied calmly. I found something that was already alive and it protected us. I am not their enemy, but I cannot hand this over. Trell sighed heavily. I do not know how long I can shield you from their scans. The Dominion has ordered full lockdown. Aaron said. Then open the maintenance locks. Near the outer rim, I will take a shuttle before they trap us. Trell hesitated, but finally said, I will delay them for as long as I can. Just do not bring war back here again. Aaron packed his tools and ration bars, then helped Luma into a small maintenance suit designed for light gravity. The visor adjusted itself automatically and displayed faint outlines around her hands and feet. She moved with growing confidence, even though fear lingered behind her calm face. Aaron said gently, You are doing well. I never had this kind of courage when I was your age, she smiled. I learned it from you. The words warmed his chest in a way he could not describe. They slipped through side corridors, avoiding patrols guided by the visor's pulses, which warned them whenever motion sensors were near. The station lights dimmed as the Dominion rerouted power to control systems, but that only helped them move unseen. They reached the outer rim hangars where old cargo shuttles rested unused. A soft sound behind them made Arun turn. Revik stood at the far end of the corridor, his armor scratched but his bearing still proud. He held his rifle low, not aimed yet. He said, Human, you have no idea what you have awakened, that thing you call a map. It is the key to a network of weapons older than empires handed over, and I can still guarantee your safety. Aaron shook his head. It is not a weapon. It is memory, and it chose to trust a child. Revik took a slow step forward. You think choice matters to machines, they only follow code. And that code always leads to war. Aaron said, then maybe it is time someone wrote a new code with mercy in it. Before Revik could reply, Luma stepped between them, her small frame glowing softly under the visor. She said the map is not for killing, it is for rebuilding. Her voice was calm, but carried weight that made even the soldier pause. Revik's visor flickered for a moment, his armor registering strange readings from the field around her. He looked, unsettled, but anger returned quickly. He said enough sentiment and raised his weapon. Arun moved faster than thought, throwing a pulse grenade that burst with white light blinding sensors for a second. He grabbed Luma and dove through the open hatch of a nearby shuttle, sealing it shut. The engine screamed as he forced them to life. The shuttle shook as bolts struck the hull, but it held. Aaron guided it through debris clouds and out into open space. The Dominion ships fired warning shots, but did not pursue far, perhaps because of orders not to destroy what they wanted captured. Luma sat beside him, silent, staring at the map projection now floating in the cockpit. It showed more than before, pathways of light connecting the 5 points with trails of faint energy like veins through the void. Aaron realized it was not just a map. It was a living network of memory designed to awaken when peace was possible again. Maybe that time had come. Hours later, they reached a quiet region where only faint signals drifted from old mining outposts. Aaron set the shuttle to drift mode and checked the readings. The blinking point from earlier grew brighter. The map was leading them toward a planet shrouded in dust and electromagnetic storms. Luma tilted her head, listening through the visor. It is calling, she said softly, but there is sadness. Aaron watched the swirling clouds on the screen and nodded. Maybe it remembers being left alone too long. He adjusted the course toward the coordinates, knowing they might find danger, but feeling that the truth was worth it. As they approached the planet, he replayed the data logs from the Bone Vault. One message stood out. It was a Starborn recording translated by the visor. The voice spoke in calm tones that seemed both alien and familiar. It said, if you hear this, you are the bridge between fire and dawn. Protect the seeds, guide them with care, and they will rise again. Aaron stared at the words for a long moment, realizing the scale of what they had found. The Starborn had not vanished. They had hidden their children across the stars, waiting for guardians who would not seek power, but purpose. Luma reached out and touched his hand, saying, we will find them all and wake them. Aaron nodded, feeling the weight of destiny pressing on him, yet somehow lighter than before. He knew the Dominion would not give up, that Revok would hunt them across every star lane. But he also knew that now they had something greater than fear. They had direction. The visor dimmed and the ship entered the planet's upper atmosphere, wrapped in lightning and storm. Aaron tightened his grip on the controls and whispered, "Hold on, little one. This is only the beginning, because what waits down there might change. The galaxy forever, and humans would once again be at the heart of it. Not as conquerors, but as keepers of a promise older than memory itself, race." Across the void, the shuttle plunged through the storm-filled skies of the forgotten planet. Lightning danced around it and thunder rolled like the growl of something ancient waiting to wake. Aaron held the controls tight, while Luma sat still beside him, her visor glowing through the dim light of the cockpit. The wind screamed, but the old shuttle held together through skill and luck. The clouds thinned, and below them appeared a sea of dust and ruin. Gray plains scattered with half-buried towers that once belonged to a civilization long gone. Arun guided the shuttle to a landing on a high ridge near what looked like a massive crater. At the center of that crater stood a single spire shining faintly beneath the dust, as if calling them home. When they stepped out of the shuttle, the air was thin and dry, carrying a metallic taste that burned the lungs, yet it felt strangely alive. Luma walked slowly, feeling the ground with her hands through the visor, which shimmered faint blue as it read the faint energy beneath the surface. Aaron followed her, watching the horizon and keeping his pulse rifle ready. The Dominion would not stop at one loss, they would come again. He thought of Revok and the soldiers, and knew that somewhere out there they were already tracking him, but he had no choice now. The map inside the visor pulsed, brighter, drawing them toward the spire. The closer they came, the more alive the land became. The dust began to lift in slow spirals of light, as if reacting to their steps. The spire stood tall, almost as high as the shuttle itself, and carved into it were patterns that looked like flowing rivers frozen in stone. Luma placed her palm on it, and the lines lit up, sending a pulse of blue across the valley. Aaron felt a vibration run through the ground, and a door opened at the base of the spire, revealing a stairway leading down. He followed her inside and found a hall filled with machines half asleep and covered in dust. Each one bore the same symbol that had appeared on the visor map. The center of the hall was a cradle-like structure, made of smooth crystal plates. Within it rested a small orb of light flickering weakly. Luma touched the visor and whispered something in her language. The orb brightened, and a wave of warmth filled the hall. The machines stirred faintly, as if remembering their duty. Aaron realized what they had found. It was one of the Starborn nurseries, just as the map had shown. He began recording everything, scanning every surface, while Luma stood near the orb, speaking softly. The light grew stronger, and the visor translated her words. She was telling the orb stories of what she had seen about the station, about him, about how humans built not to rule, but to help. The orb responded with soft flashes, as if listening, but peace never lasted long in their story. Because above the planet, in the shadow of a ring of broken satellites, another ship appeared. It was sleek black and bore no Dominion markings yet. Aaron recognized the signature of its drive, the same one that had carried Revok's patrol crafts. It was him the commander had followed their trail through stolen Dominion codes. Aaron's shuttle sensors detected the ship descending fast. He turned to Luma. "We need to go now." She nodded, but before they could leave, the orb pulsed one last time and sent a beam of light into the visor, feeding it new data. More coordinates, more nurseries across the stars. As they ran back to the shuttle, Aaron saw dust rising from the horizon. A second ship, smaller, following Revok's lead. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were hunters trained to capture, not kill. He climbed into the cockpit and powered up the engines. Luma strapped in the visor, glowing so bright it almost hurt to look at. Revok's voice echoed through the comm. "Surrender the artifact, and I will spare the child." Arun ignored him and launched the shuttle into the storm clouds. The chase that followed burned through the sky and into orbit. The hunter ships fired grapplers that sliced through the air like whips. Arun dodged through the ruins of satellites, using their broken hulls as shields. The shuttle shook under fire, panels tore away, but it held. The visor began projecting guidance lines, showing safe paths through the debris field. Luma said, "Go up and left now," and he followed. Without hesitation, The hunters overshot, colliding with fragments of a collapsed station, while Aaron's ship slipped through a narrow gap into open space. They entered the void beyond the planet where stars stretched like rivers of silver. The engines screamed as Aaron pushed them to their limits. He knew they could not outrun warships forever, but if they reached the next coordinate, maybe they could hide among those who still remembered the Starborn. The visor projected an arc showing the route to a system called Irelas, a place rumored to be home to independent colonies that the Dominion could not easily control. It was far but reachable. He adjusted the course and leaned back. Gasping for breath, Luma reached out and held his hand. She said, "You always run toward danger." Aaron smiled faintly. "It is the only way to make sure it does not reach those who cannot run." He looked at her and wondered at how much she had changed from the frightened child on the station. She had become calm, strong, her words measured as if something within her was awakening. The visor's light reflected in her silver eyes, making her look almost older than she was. Hours turned into days as they crossed empty space. The ship ran low on fuel, and they stopped at drifting mining platforms to gather supplies. Some aliens they met were afraid to help when they saw the visor, but others shared food and power cells, whispering about the human who defied the Dominion. A small legend began to spread, one that painted humans not as reckless destroyers but as stubborn protectors. Each kindness gave Aaron strength, and each story gave Luma hope. One night, while they floated near a dying star, they received a transmission from an unknown source. It was a woman's voice, soft but urgent, saying to the human engineer, "We know what you carry. Bring the Starborn child to Irelas, and we will stand with you before it is too late." The message ended abruptly, leaving only static. Aaron looked at Luma and said, "It seems we are not alone anymore." She nodded and said, "Then we must hurry." Behind them, the black ship of Revik appeared again, engines burning cold and bright. He had followed through their every jump, refusing to give up the hunter. Ace that led his wing opened a channel and said, "Humans always run, but this time there is nowhere left." Aaron replied, "You do not understand. We are not running. We are leading something brighter than any empire can kill." Revik's reply was lost as Aaron dived the shuttle into a gravitational rift around the dying star, using its pull to sling them forward. The hull creaked, and alarms screamed, but the maneuver worked. The black ships were caught in the turbulence and thrown off course. When silence returned, only stars remained ahead. Aaron leaned back, exhausted. Luma reached for the visor and smiled. The map changed again, showing that one of the 5 points had brightened fully, while the others flickered faintly. The first nursery was awake. The Starborn were beginning to stir across the galaxy, and it had started because a human refused to hand over a child, and a simple machine built for kindness had become the spark of a legend that would cross worlds. He looked out at the endless stars and said quietly, "This is the race across the void, not to conquer but to awaken." And for the first time he felt that humanity's restless heart had finally found its true direction. Would you like me to write? Part 6 next. Around 800 words in, the same long, simple, flowing third-person style. The Siege of the Nursery. The journey to Irelas took 5 long days through the silent stretches of deep space where only drifting dust and faint radio whispers broke the stillness. The shuttle was battered and its hull groaned with every jump. But Aaron coaxed life from the dying engines with the same patience he used to build the visor. Luma slept for long hours, exhausted by the strain of their flight. Yet the visor glowed even while she rested, sending slow rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat. When she woke, she said quietly, "I can feel the others. They are waking one by one." Aaron smiled, though his eyes were heavy. He said, "Then we must be their shield until they can stand." As they neared Irelas, the sensors lit with signals. The system was crowded with old mining rigs, broken freighters, and hidden stations. A free haven built from the bones of forgotten wars. It was not ruled by the Dominion, and that made it dangerous, but also full of hope. A convoy of cargo ships approached and hailed them, identifying themselves as the Free Guild of Irelas. Their leader, a grizzled alien named Vero, with scaled skin and tired eyes, looked at Arun through the hollow and said, You are the human. From the relay channels, the one who carries the Starborn child Arun nodded. Varro gave a slow smile, then said, You have stirred the Empire's nest. They have sent a fleet toward us. You better come quick. When their shuttle docked at the largest station, they were met by a mix of humans and aliens, armed but curious. Aaron stepped out carrying the portable console with the Visor data. Luma followed close behind, drawing soft gasps from the crowd. The Free Guild had heard rumors of Starborn relics, but seeing one alive changed the air around them. Varro led them through wide halls filled with banners from dozens of worlds. He said, We heard the Dominion called this child dangerous, but I think she is something else. Aaron replied, She is the key too, something old. Something the Starborn left behind to rebuild what the wars destroyed. Varro nodded grimly, then said, The Dominion fleet will be here within a day. They will not let this place stand if they think you are hiding here. They began preparations. Through the night, the Free Guild was not a great army, but it had engineers, smugglers, and miners who knew how to fight smart, not hard. They turned cargo drones into defense turrets, rerouted power through broken reactors, and filled empty bays with reflective foil to scramble enemy sensors. Aaron worked alongside them, using his experience with Dominion tech to find weak points in their usual formations. He taught them how to use gravity wells from the nearby gas giant to create false echoes in space so that the fleet would think there were hundreds of ships waiting, instead of a few dozen. Luma helped in her own way by guiding maintenance teams through narrow tunnels, the Visor showing her heat and sound where others would see only darkness. Her calm voice steadied them. When the Dominion fleet arrived, it looked like a wall of stars, 100 ships moving in cold, perfect formation. Revek's flagship led them, its hull marked by fresh scars from the chase. He sent a broadcast, To the Free Guild station, surrender the human and the relic child, and no harm will come to the rest. Varro stood in the command chamber and spat on the floor, saying, We do not surrender our guests. The transmission ended with static. The battle began. First wave came fast, sleek destroyers diving through the asteroid field, firing plasma bursts that shook the station. Aaron coordinated the defense, linking old railguns through his console. He turned mining lasers into traps, cutting through enemy fighters as they passed too close. The Free Guild ships weaved between debris, using the false echoes he had designed to confuse sensors. Every explosion lit the dark like fireworks, but for every Dominion ship destroyed, 2 more closed in. Revek ordered his fleet to encircle the station and prepare for boarding. Aaron knew they could not win a direct fight, so he formed a desperate plan. He remembered the Starborn lattice on the first station and how it had answered Luma. He believed the nursery beneath Irelis held something similar. The Visor map had shown faint energy patterns around the planet's moon. He told Varro to hold as long as possible, then took a shuttle with Luma and a small team of engineers down to the moon. They landed near a canyon filled with blue mist and buried structures half visible through the rock. Luma led the way, her visor shining brighter with every step. Inside the canyon they found another Starborn vault, smaller than the first but still alive with faint hums. The walls were covered in old writing, the Visor translated as light to shield life. Aaron realized it could project an energy field wide enough to protect the entire station, but the system was dormant. He and his team began connecting power cells from their shuttle, feeding energy into the lattice while Luma placed her hands on the core, whispering soft words in her native tongue. The vault trembled as if waking from a long sleep, and beams of light shot upward into the sky, connecting with satellites left in orbit centuries ago. The energy field spread around the moon and the station, wrapping it in a shimmering shell. Above them, the Dominion ships fired, but the plasma bolts scattered across the field like raindrops on glass. The sudden light confused their targeting systems. Revek ordered all guns to focus on the human shuttle, thinking the source of the field was there. Arun heard the warning through the comms and told Luma to finish the link. She nodded and placed the Visor against the core. The field pulsed brighter, sending a wave of force that pushed the Dominion fleet back. The energy overloaded Arun's instruments, but he stayed by her side, shielding her as best as he could. The battle lasted hours. The Dominion fleet tried to breach the shield again and again, but each attempt failed. The Free Guild counterattacked with hit-and-run strikes, damaging fuel lines and cutting engines. The station that had once been a trade hub now stood as a fortress forged. By necessity finally. Revik realized he could not win without destroying everything. He ordered a retreat to regroup. The remaining ships turned and slipped back into the void, leaving behind wreckage and the cold silence of defeat. When the last enemy, signal vanished, Aaron fell to his knees beside Luma. The visor flickered, then stabilized, its glow softer but warmer. The vault core dimmed as if it had given all it could. Luma opened her eyes and smiled through exhaustion, saying, "We did it, they are safe." He nodded, barely able to speak. Varro's voice came through the comms, laughing rough and loud. "You did more than hold them off, human. You gave the Free Guild hope again." As they returned to the station, crowds gathered to greet them, cheering, for the small girl who had guided them through fire and for the human who had stood against an empire. Aaron looked out at the stars and felt the pull of the remaining points on the map, 4 still waiting. The fight had only just begun, but now they had allies. The siege of the nursery had proven that courage and care could stand against power and control, and somewhere deep inside the visor, the Starborn network pulsed again, as if whispering a promise that the light they had lit here would spread until no shadow could hide it. "Would you like me to write part 7 now, around 800 words in the same style and flow to finish the full story completely?" The human oath and ending. The stars above Aeralis were calm again. The battlefield that had once been lit with plasma fire now drifted with fragments of broken ships, slowly turning in the quiet of space. The station lights glowed softly across the curve of the moon below, and for the first time since the war began, the people there could breathe without fear. Aaron stood by the wide viewport in the command deck, staring out at the horizon where dawn was rising over the blue mist of the moon. Luma sat beside him, her visor faintly alive with light that matched the sunrise. The battle had ended, but peace was fragile and both of them knew it. The Dominion would not forgive this defeat, not when a single human and a blind alien child had humiliated their fleet and awakened a power they thought buried forever. The Free Guild had turned the station into a sanctuary. Ships arrived every hour, bringing refugees, merchants, and scientists who wanted to help rebuild or simply witness what had happened. Varro moved through the crowds like a proud general, and everywhere people whispered about the Starborn child and her protector. Aaron never thought of himself as a protector. He saw himself as an engineer, but now the galaxy saw him as something else, a symbol of defiance and hope. He felt the weight of that, but he carried it quietly, repairing machines and rebuilding defenses, knowing that the next fight was only a matter of time. Luma had changed too. She no longer hid behind others when she spoke. Her voice carried the calm strength of someone who had seen both fear and courage. She spent her days walking among the new arrivals, her visor translating sounds of joy and sadness alike. She would stop to comfort a crying child or listen to an old miner tell stories of lost worlds. When she laughed, others laughed. When she spoke, people listened. It was as if the visor had given her not just sight, but the ability to see hearts more clearly than anyone else. Aaron often watched her from a distance, wondering how much of the Starborn power now lived through her. One evening, Varro called a meeting in the central chamber. The leaders of the Free Guild, the engineers from the outer colonies, and the surviving captains gathered around a hollow map of the sector. Aaron stood beside Luma as Varro pointed at the glowing lines spreading from Aeralis outward. "These are the signals that came after the battle," he said calmly. "Every one of them matches the pattern of the Starborn map. Whatever you two did down there woke something across half the galaxy." Aaron studied the map in silence. He saw that 4 more points now pulsed steadily, 1 near the rim. Worlds, 1 near a dead system beyond Dominion space, and 2 hidden in the dark zones. The Starborn were awakening faster than he had dared to hope. Varro looked at him and asked, "What happens now?" Aaron took a deep breath and said, "They will come for us again, but this time we do not run, we go to them. We wake the rest before the Dominion can twist their story. We show the galaxy that what they call relics are not weapons but living promises." The room was silent for a long moment until one of the captains, a broad-shouldered human from the belt, said, "Then we fight not for conquest but for life," and all around the table others nodded. While the leaders planned, Arun returned to his workshop and began building again. He gathered old Dominion tech, melted it down, forged new parts from scraps, and embedded fragments of the Starborn lattice into small handheld beacons. Each one could broadcast the Starborn field for a short time, enough to protect a ship or colony from attack. He called them Lights of Care and shared the designs, freely refusing to patent or profit. The idea spread faster than the Dominion could censor, and soon traders, smugglers, and civilians across the outer sectors carried these lights as symbols of unity. Revek, however, had not been destroyed. His flagship had survived the retreat, and from the dark reaches of Dominion space, he watched recordings of the battle. Again and again his pride was wounded, but his curiosity had grown. He began to question the orders he had followed for years. The Empire had told him the Starborn were extinct and humans were reckless children. Yet he had seen a child command power, greater than his entire fleet, and a human refuse to use it as a weapon. He could not erase that image. He gathered his remaining soldiers and told them that they would not return to Central Command until they understood what they had truly fought. Weeks passed and the network of Starborn signals grew stronger. The light that had started from Irelas began to connect colonies far apart. Strangers spoke across systems as if united by one heartbeat. The Dominion tried to jam the frequencies, but could not stop them. The people were beginning to believe that hope could be built again, not with fear but with care. Aaron knew that was the true victory. One night the station sensors detected a small ship approaching from Dominion Space Weapons Cold. Transponder hidden, Arun went to the docking bay expecting another fight. But when the hatch opened, Revek stepped out alone. His armor battered, his helmet in his hands. He said quietly, "I came not as your enemy, but as someone who wishes to understand." Arun watched him for a long moment, then nodded and said, "Then come in, but your weapon stays here." Revek set his rifle on the deck and followed. They spoke for hours in the quiet of the workshop. Revek listened as Arun explained what the Visor had done, how it awakened memories, not armies, how it linked hearts, not guns. Luma joined them later, her visor faintly glowing. She looked at the soldier who had once hunted her and said, "You can still change." Revek bowed his head and said, "Perhaps I already have." He told them that the Dominion fleet was divided, many officers questioning their orders because of what had happened at Irelas. He offered information about the remaining Starborn vaults hidden within Dominion territory, and said, "If you go, there I will help you reach them." Aaron looked at him and saw not the monster he once feared, but a man who had seen the truth behind power. When dawn came, the three of them stood by the viewport, watching the light spread over the moon. The galaxy beyond seemed endless and full of danger, but also alive with new beginnings. Aaron turned to Luma and said, "We started this to help one child, and now look at what it became." She smiled and said, "Because you helped without asking for anything." The Visor hummed softly and projected a new message in the air written in the Starborn language. Aaron read the translation aloud. It said, "To those who carry light without fear, the stars are yours to heal, not to rule." Later that day, a great gathering filled the station plaza. People from dozens of worlds stood together waiting. Aaron and Luma walked to the center. Revek stood behind them, unarmed. The crowd fell silent as Aaron raised a small device that projected the Starborn symbol across the sky, spoke in a steady voice saying, "This oath is not of one world, but of many. We swear to protect the weak, to share what we build, and never use creation for control." The crowd repeated his words slowly, then louder, until their voices filled the halls. It became known as the Human Oath, though it belonged to all who believed in it. As the sun set over Irelas, Aaron felt peace for the first time in years. The visor on Luma's head shimmered brighter than ever, its light stretching upward into the dark sky, sending one final pulse that rippled across the galaxy. At that same moment, sensors in far systems detected 4 more Starborn nurseries awakening, guided by the pulse of the child, and the human who refused to give up. The Dominion fleet that had once ruled through fear now faced a tide of unity that could not be silenced. In the quiet after the cheers died down, Luma leaned against Aaron's arm and said softly, "We did it." He smiled and said, "No, little one. We just began." The stars shone. Above them, countless and endless, and for the first time in history, the galaxy felt smaller. Not because it was conquered, but because hearts across it now shared one light born from a gift made by human hands. for no reason but care, and that was enough to change everything forever.